The battlefield was quiet, but it did not feel peaceful. Smoke floated slowly over the broken land. Burned machines, shattered weapons, and bodies from many worlds covered the ground. The war between the Galactic Coalition and the Karthak Dominion had finally ended, but the fear and pain were still alive in the air. In the middle of the destruction lay a single alien warrior. His name was Vreelanak. He was a Karthak, a species feared across the galaxy. Karthaks were tall and strong, with hard scales, sharp claws, and glowing eyes. They were known as warriors from birth. They believed in strength above all things. Weakness was shame. Mercy was forbidden. Now Vreelanak was broken. One of his legs was crushed under a destroyed armored vehicle. Two of his arms were trapped, twisted at painful angles. Dark blood leaked from cracks in his armor and soaked into the dirt below him. Every breath hurt. Every movement sent sharp pain through his body. He tried to move again. His upper arms pushed against the ground, muscles shaking, but his body refused to obey. A low growl escaped his throat, filled with anger and frustration. He had survived the battle. He had fought until the very end, but he could not stand. Karthak warriors moved across the battlefield, collecting the living and honoring the dead. Some passed close to him. Their eyes briefly met his. None of them stopped. They saw his crushed leg. They saw his trapped arms. They saw weakness. To the Karthak, a crippled warrior was already dead. Soon they were gone. Vreelanak lay alone under the darkening sky. Cold wind passed over his scales. His anger slowly faded, replaced by something worse. Shame. He remembered his training, his commanders, his people. He remembered the words drilled into him since birth. A warrior who cannot stand has no honor. He clenched his jaw as his vision blurred. He did not cry out. Karthaks did not beg. He would die silently if he had to. Alien soldiers from the Galactic Coalition began moving through the field next. Humans, Talron, Voskari, and others. They searched for survivors, helping their wounded, calling out to each other. Some noticed Vreelanak. A few raised their weapons. Then they lowered them. The war was over. Killing him was unnecessary. Helping him was dangerous. The Karthak were known for cruelty. Many coalition worlds still burned because of them. No one wanted to risk saving a monster. Vreelanak understood, still. A small, foolish part of him hoped. Minutes passed. Then more. The sky slowly changed color as the sun sank low. His body grew colder. His breathing slowed. He knew he was dying. Then a shadow fell across his face. Vreelanak's eyes snapped open. A figure stood above him, smaller than most aliens. 2 arms, no claws, no scales, a human. The human wore scratched armor covered in dirt and dried blood. His helmet was missing, revealing a tired face and eyes filled with exhaustion. He looked around the battlefield, then down at Vreelanak. For a moment, neither of them moved. Vreelanak expected a weapon, a final shot, an end. Instead, the human spoke. "You're in bad shape." The words were simple, calm, not angry. Vreelanak let out a weak, bitter sound. "Leave," he said quietly. "I am finished." The human studied him closely. His eyes moved over the crushed leg, the trapped arms. The blood dot in the human straightened up. He turned away. Vreelanak felt the last spark of hope die inside him. He stared back at the sky, accepting his fate, but the human stopped After only a few steps, he stood still, slowly. He turned back. "No," the human said softly. "Not like this." He took a step forward, and in that single step, something in the universe began to change. Vreelanak's body ached with every heartbeat. The pain was sharp, twisting through his broken bones and burnt muscles like fire in ice. He tried to lift his head, but the weight of his injuries pinned him to the ground. He could hear the faint sounds of the battlefield distant shouts, metal clanging, the hum of retreating ships, but they felt like they were from another world. His mind drifted, slipping between consciousness and the darkness he knew was coming. He had been a warrior all his life. He had fought in hundreds of battles, each one a test of strength, courage, and survival. He had led squads, trained young Karthak soldiers, and faced enemies no one else dared challenge. To die on the battlefield was honorable. To be left behind like this was shame. The thought burned hotter than his wounds. Other Karthak warriors had moved past him, leaving no word, no glance. It was the law of his people. The weak must fall so the strong may rise. And now, as he lay helpless, he understood why the other soldiers avoided him. He had been a monster in their eyes, an enemy whose kind had destroyed cities and burned worlds. Mercy was not a word they had for him. Vreelanak closed his eyes, expecting the end to come quietly. Yet, despite every instinct screaming at him to give up, he felt the faintest flicker of hope when the human remained. The human knelt slowly beside him, as if approaching an injured animal rather than a feared alien warrior. He did not rush, did not show fear. His eyes were steady, calm, and strangely gentle. "My name's Evan Carter," he said. "I'm a soldier. I'm here to help you, Vreelanak." S' throat made a low, gurgling sound. He tried to scoff, but it came out as a weak rasp. "You risk yourself for me. I am your enemy. Leave." Evan shook his head, not leaving anyone behind. Not now, not ever. Vreelanak's mind raced. Why? He had killed humans before. He had seen them die, their worlds burned, their families gone, and yet this one human knelt beside him, refusing to abandon him. A strange, unfamiliar feeling stirred inside Vreelanak, confusion, disbelief, maybe even gratitude. He had never felt gratitude for anyone outside his own species. And yet, here it was, growing quietly, almost painfully, like a small flame in the darkness. Evan carefully examined his injuries. "You're losing blood internally. You won't last long if we don't move you." Vreelanak tried to resist. Pain tore through him as he shifted slightly, attempting to sit. "I am done. My people, they have abandoned me. So must you." Evan's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. "No, your people made their choice. I make mine. I'm not leaving you here to die." He began, removing the wreckage trapping Vreelanak's arms, moving slowly, apologizing every time the alien hissed in pain. Vreelanak's pride screamed at him to push the human away, to reject this help. But his body was too weak, too broken to resist. "Why?" Vreelanak finally asked through clenched teeth. "Why help me, after all I've done?" Evan paused, looking into his amber eyes, then said softly, almost to himself, "Because I know what it's like to be left behind, and no one should have to die alone." The words struck something deep inside Vreelanak. He had faced countless enemies, survived battles that killed dozens, even hundreds of his comrades, and yet no one had ever looked at him like that. No one had ever chosen him, not because of duty, not because of honor, but because of something stronger, compassion. Pain twisted through his body. But for the first time, he felt something else, hope. A fragile, flickering hope that maybe, just maybe, someone cared. That maybe, even a Karthak could be given a second chance. Evan adjusted his grip on the alien, sweat running down his face, and whispered, "We'll get through this, together." Vreelanak's chest heaved as he tried to speak, but no words came. He simply stared at the human, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. In that moment, the battlefield around them, the smoke, the screams, the death, none of it mattered. One human had chosen to step forward, and that single act, simple, brave, and utterly human, was enough to change everything. For the first time in his life, Vreelanak realized that strength was not only about fighting and killing. Sometimes it was about letting someone stand beside you when all hope seemed lost. And that thought, fragile and strange, was the first step toward survival. Vreelanak could barely lift his head. Every breath felt like fire burning through his chest. Every slight movement sent jagged pain through his broken arms and crushed leg. He had survived countless battles, yet he had never felt so weak, so exposed. The battlefield stretched around him, a graveyard of shattered ships, smoking craters, and bodies from dozens of worlds. Silence pressed down, broken only by distant cries of those still moving, still trying to survive. The human remained beside him, kneeling in the dirt. Evan Carter's armor was scratched, blood-stained, and worn, but his hands were steady. They lifted and moved, the wreckage trapping Vreelanak's arms, one careful motion at a time. Every hiss of pain the Karthak made brought a frown to Evan's face, but he never stopped. His resolve was absolute, his focus unshakable. Vreelanak tried to push him away. "You waste your strength," he rasped, each word costing him more energy than he could spare. "I am your enemy. Leave me to die." Evan shook his head slowly. "No," he said firmly. "I don't leave anyone behind. Not now, not ever. You're alive, and that's what matters." The words struck deeper than any weapon ever could. Vreelanak's eyes, burning with pain and pride, softened slightly. He had killed humans before. He had faced them in battle, and he had seen their worlds burn. And yet, this one human knelt here, risking his own life to save him. It was impossible, absurd, and yet it was real. "Why?" Vreelanak whispered, voice weak. "Why save me? After everything I've done, after my people have abandoned me." Evan looked at him with steady eyes. "Because I know what it feels like to be left behind. Because no one should die alone, no matter who they are. You're not just a warrior. You're a being, and being alive matters." Vreelanak's chest tightened. He did not understand these words. He had been taught that weakness deserved death, that mercy was a fool's choice. And yet, here was a human, acting with strength far beyond mere muscle or weaponry. He had chosen mercy, and in that choice, Vreelanak saw something he had never seen before. Courage of a different kind. Evan began moving him slowly, inch by inch. He used his own strength to lift Vreelanak's crushed body, careful not to worsen the injuries. Each movement caused a hiss of pain, each groan of suffering a sharp reminder of the cost. But Evan did not stop. He adjusted his grip, spoke softly, offering words of reassurance. "Almost there. Just a little more. You can make it." Vreelanak's mind drifted. Memories of his battles flashed before him, friends lost, enemies destroyed, victories celebrated, and defeats endured. He had always believed that survival was the only measure of strength. But now he realized that strength could also mean compassion, sacrifice, and choosing to act when no one else would. The distant sounds of other soldiers grew louder. Some passed by, whispering or shaking their heads, their faces showing disbelief. "He's a Karthak," they muttered. "Why help him?" Evan did not answer. He only kept moving forward, lifting, dragging, and supporting Vrilanak. Every step tested his endurance. Every second felt like hours. And yet, he continued, because giving up was never an option. Vrilanak's pride struggled against his pain. He had been a leader, a killer, a survivor. To rely on another, especially a human, felt humiliating. And yet, in the way Evan stayed beside him, his patience, his determination, Vrilanak began to understand something new. He began to trust. Not fully, not yet, but enough to know he might survive this night because of this human. "Why?" Vrilanak whispered again, voice barely audible. "Because I choose to," Evan said simply. His hands were steady, his voice calm. "Because leaving someone behind, that's not who I am. Not who we should be." A flicker of understanding passed through Vrilanak. He had fought for honor all his life. But now he realized that true honor might not be in victory or death. True honor could be in choosing life, in choosing mercy, in standing by another when everyone else walks away. Vrilanak's amber eyes softened as he looked at Evan. He wanted to speak, to thank him, but words failed him. Pain, pride, and disbelief tangled together. He only managed a small nod. The smallest acknowledgement of gratitude he had ever given anyone. For the first time in his long, brutal life, Vrilanak felt something he had never truly felt before. Hope. Fragile, quiet, and delicate, but alive. He realized survival was no longer just about strength. Survival now meant trust. Survival now meant allowing another being to stand beside him, to care when no one else would. Evan lifted him again, slowly, carefully, inch by painful inch. And as the human soldier carried him toward safety, Vrilanak understood something else. Sometimes the bravest act in the universe was not to fight, but to let someone help you when the world had abandoned you. And in that moment, he allowed it. Vrilanak's body screamed with pain. Every movement sent waves of fire through his broken bones. Every breath was a struggle. His arms, twisted and trapped beneath the rubble, felt like they were on fire. His leg, crushed under a heavy piece of metal, throbbed with unbearable agony. Yet, through it all, he lay in silence, waiting for the inevitable. Death had come quietly once before, in the darkness of space, in the chaos of war, but this felt different. It was slow, humiliating, alone. Then a shadow moved over him. Evan Carter, the human soldier, knelt beside him again. The sun had dipped lower, casting long, cold shadows across the battlefield. Dust swirled in the fading light. Vrilanak's amber eyes barely followed the movement, but he saw the human's face tired, smeared with dirt, but determined. Evan's hands, strong and steady despite exhaustion, gripped the broken alien carefully. "We're getting you out," Evan said, his voice calm, unwavering. "Hold on, just a little more." Vrilanak's pride bristled at the words. To rely on a human, to allow a fragile creature of flesh and bone to support him. A Karthak warrior, a creature of scales and claws and centuries of battle. It was unbearable. "I do not need you," he rasped, his voice weak and pained. "Leave me." Evan shook his head slowly. "No, I'm not leaving you. Not while I can help. You're not just an enemy, you're alive. And that matters." The battlefield around them was chaos. Smoke rose from craters. Debris littered the land. Other soldiers, alien and human alike, moved past them in hurried clusters. Some looked at Evan in disbelief. Others whispered to each other, unsure, cautious. "He's a Karthak. Why help him?" Evan ignored them all. He had lifted Vrilanak before, but now, as he hoisted the alien's torso from the rubble, his muscles screamed. Sweat poured down his face. His breath came ragged and heavy. Pain burned in every joint, every tendon, and yet he did not stop. He would not stop. Vrilanak tried to move on his own. He pushed weakly against the human's arms. The effort was pathetic, yet instinctively he attempted to rise. Pain tore through him. He hissed and growled, but Evan held him firmly. "It's okay," the human whispered. "I've got you. Don't fight it. Don't fight me." Vrilanak's mind drifted. Memories of battles flashed through him. He had killed humans before. He had destroyed cities. He had led warriors into fire, never questioning the cost. And now, here he was, completely dependent on one human willing to risk his own life to save an enemy. It was impossible, absurd, and yet it was happening. They moved slowly, inch by inch, every step a battle. Every movement sent shockwaves of pain through Vrilanak's body. He cried out once or twice, but Evan never flinched. He murmured reassurances, telling the alien he was doing well, telling him to breathe, telling him to hold on. At one point, Evan stumbled. The weight of Vrilanak nearly dragged him down. The human gritted his teeth, planted his feet firmly, and forced himself back up. "Not leaving you," he muttered between clenched teeth. "Not today. Not ever." Vrilanak's pride screamed at him to reject this help, to push this human away, to suffer in silence. Yet through the haze of pain, through the haze of shame, he felt something strange gratitude, a quiet, unfamiliar warmth that spread through him despite the cold, despite the blood, despite the suffering. They had nearly reached the medic's station when Vrilanak's strength almost gave out completely. He sagged in Evan's arms, barely able to hold on. The human's hands did not falter. They tightened, adjusted, and lifted again. "Just a few more steps," Evan said, voice steady, firm, patient. "You're going to be okay. I won't let you die here." Vrilanak's chest rose and fell with shallow, painful breaths. He wanted to say something, anything, but words failed him. His pride, his shame, his warrior's code, all tangled together. And yet, he understood. This human soldier had chosen him. Not because it was required, not because he owed it, not for honor or duty. He had chosen mercy. Something inside Vrilanak shifted. Something old, hard, and unyielding softened. He realized that maybe strength was not just about killing and surviving. Maybe strength was about protecting, about caring, about acting when no one else would. Step by step, Evan carried him across the battlefield. Each movement tested them both, but neither gave up. And as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Vrilanak understood something he had never before allowed himself to accept. Survival was not just about fighting. Survival could mean letting someone help you. Survival could mean trusting another. And for the first time, Vrelanak allowed it. The medics worked quickly, their hands moving over Vrelanak's broken body with skill and precision. Machines beeped, lights flashed, and the smell of antiseptic filled the small triage tent. Vrelanak lay still, too weak to resist, too exhausted to fight. He had survived the battlefield, but the real test of his life was just beginning. Evan Carter stayed beside him the entire time. He did not sit, did not leave, and did not speak unless necessary. His presence was quiet but steady, like a lighthouse guiding a lost ship through stormy seas. He adjusted Vrelanak's position when the alien groaned in pain, whispered encouragements when the Carthak's breathing grew shallow, and never wavered, never faltered. Other soldiers entered the tent. Some human, some alien. They looked at the wounded Carthak with suspicion, with fear, and even with disgust. "Why are we saving him?" One whispered, his voice tight with disbelief. "He's Carthak. He's a killer." Evan looked at them, his jaw set. "Because he's alive. That's all that matters. He has a right to survive like anyone else." Vrelanak heard these words faintly through the haze of pain and sedation. A strange feeling stirred inside him, something he could not name. Gratitude, perhaps, or confusion, or even shame. The Carthak warrior had never been shown such respect for his life, never been treated as more than a weapon, more than a monster. Yet here it was, a human choosing to see him as something beyond the war, beyond the hatred hours past. Machines hummed. Medics worked tirelessly. Slowly, Vrelanak's breathing steadied. His body was broken, but the worst of the bleeding and shock had been contained. He would live. Against all odds, he would survive. When he finally opened his eyes, he saw Evan sitting beside him, exhausted, leaning on the edge of the medical bed. The human's face was tired, eyes lined with fatigue, but they were gentle and watchful. Vrelanak tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. Pain and weakness made communication almost impossible. "You're awake," Evan said softly. "You made it. You're going to be okay." Vrelanak's mind raced. Alive. He was alive. He had expected death, expected the cold embrace of silence. Instead, he felt warmth, not just from the machines or the blankets, but from the human who had refused to leave him on the battlefield. He tried to nod, but even that small gesture sent pain through his torso. Evan noticed and adjusted him gently. "You don't have to thank me," the human said. "Just survive. That's enough." Vrelanak's amber eyes held his gaze, and for the first time he felt something strange, almost unfamiliar hope. Not the fragile kind he had felt on the battlefield, flickering and weak, but something stronger, something that could grow. The story of his survival spread quickly. Across coalition networks, across battlefields, even to the worlds that had feared him most. A Carthak warrior, crippled and left for dead, had survived not because of his strength, not because of his enemy's mercy, but because a human soldier had chosen to act when everyone else had walked away. Some called it foolish. Some called it impossible. But those who had witnessed it knew the truth. Humanity, fragile and mortal as it seemed, had a strength unlike any other, a strength born not from weapons, not from armor, but from courage and compassion. Days passed. Vrelanak recovered slowly. Mechanical supports replaced his broken limbs. Healing machines stitched torn flesh, fused shattered bones, and stabilized his body. He would never fight the same way again, but he could stand, he could move, and he could think. When coalition officials questioned him, they expected rage, threats, maybe even rebellion. Instead, Vreelanec spoke clearly, honestly, and without malice. He described the battlefield, the carnage, the cruelty of war, and he spoke of the human who had saved him. Evan Carter, a soldier among billions, yet the one who had refused to abandon a dying enemy, the one who had carried a crippled warrior across a battlefield with nothing but courage and determination, the one who had chosen life over death, mercy over revenge, hope over despair. Vreelanec would never forget him. He did not know if he could ever repay the debt, but he understood something now that he had never known before. Strength was not only in victory. Strength was in choosing to protect life, even when it was difficult, even when it seemed foolish. And so, as Vreelanec lay in the triage tent, healing and learning to move again, he promised himself something. He would survive. He would honor that choice. He would carry the memory of humanity's courage wherever he went. For the first time in his long, brutal life, the alien warrior understood something profound. Sometimes, the bravest act in the universe was not to fight, not to kill, but to let someone else step forward when the world turned away. Evan Carter had stepped forward, and because of that, Vreelanec had lived. Months passed, and Vreelanec's body began to heal, slowly but surely, but surely. Mechanical supports replaced what could not be repaired and bruised. Scarred flesh fused back together under careful medical care. He could walk again, though his steps were cautious, and he could lift his arms, though the pain sometimes reminded him of how fragile his life had been. Every movement carried a memory of that battlefield, of the fire and smoke, and of the human who had refused to abandon him. He remembered every detail. The way Evan's hands never shook, even when lifting him from the wreckage. The calm in his eyes, the steady voice that never wavered, even as the battlefield roared around them. The human had carried him step by painful step, refusing to leave him behind when everyone else had. Vreelanec had survived not because of his own strength, not because of luck, but because someone had chosen to stand beside him when it mattered most. It was an alien thought for him. Carthax did not value mercy. They did not value compassion. They valued strength, ruthlessness, and honor in battle. Weakness was shame, and weakness meant death. Yet, the human had shown him a truth that shook the very core of everything he had been taught. True strength could be found in mercy, in choice, in the courage to act for another even when it was dangerous. Vreelanec had spent nights in quiet reflection, staring at the stars from his small quarters. He remembered the battlefield, the broken bodies, the cries of the wounded, and the silence that followed. He remembered his pride, his anger, and then the small, impossible flicker of hope that Evan had sparked. That hope had grown into something unshakable. He had survived because a human had chosen to help him when peace talks were scheduled between the Carthax Dominion and the Galactic Coalition. Vreelanec was hesitant. He was a warrior, a killer, an enemy in the eyes of many. Would he be accepted? Would anyone listen to him? But something inside him pushed him forward. He had a message to deliver, and it was not about vengeance or hatred. It was about truth, about understanding, and about the courage of one human who would change the course of his life. He stood before the council, his body supported by mechanical limbs, his voice strong despite the months of healing. Every scar, every piece of metal attached to his body was a testament to survival. The council's delegates, Humans, aliens, and Carthax alike watched him carefully. Some were skeptical. Some expected threats, perhaps even intimidation. But Vrillanak spoke clearly and without fear. "You fear humans because you see them as fragile," he said, his amber eyes sweeping across the chamber. "You see small bodies, soft flesh, and limited strength. You think that makes them weak. You are wrong." He paused, letting the words sink in. The delegates shifted uneasily. He continued, voice steady. "They are strong because they choose mercy. They are strong because they act when the world turns away. They are strong because they see value in life, even the life of an enemy. I know this because one human saved me when no one else would. He stepped forward when everyone else walked away. He carried me through death itself, and because of him, I live today." The chamber was silent. The delegates looked at each other, unsure what to say. Some were moved, some were ashamed, and some began to understand that strength could take forms they had never considered. Not muscle, not weapons, not armies, but courage, compassion, the ability to act when it is easier to do nothing. Nak's gaze fell on the human observers in the chamber. He did not know if Evan Carter would ever realize how much his actions had changed the galaxy's understanding of humanity, but it did not matter. What mattered was the lesson that now spread across worlds. Humanity was strong, not because they dominated others, but because they chose to protect, to stand up for the fallen, and to act with courage and mercy. For Vrillanak, the lesson was personal. He had once measured himself by how many enemies he had defeated, by how many battles he had survived. Now, he measured life by a single act of compassion, by a human who had refused to leave a dying alien on the battlefield. That act had changed him. That act had saved him. That act had shown him what true strength looked like. And so, in that chamber, in front of the galaxy's leaders, Vrillanak did more than survive. He bore witness. He spoke of courage, mercy, and humanity in the face of hatred. He told the story of a soldier who would step forward when no one else would, and in telling it, he honored not only his own survival, but the bravery of one human who had changed everything, for the first time, across the galaxy. The Carthax and the Coalition saw something new, the power of a human heart, the courage of someone who refused to abandon the weak, and the truth that strength was not just in victory yet, was in choosing to act when it was hardest, when it mattered most. Vrillanak had lived to tell the story, and the story would live long after him. Years passed, and the battlefield where Vrillanak had been left to die became a place of quiet remembrance. Smoke had cleared, the craters had begun to fill with new soil, and the wreckage had been removed, leaving only memories buried beneath the land. Yet for those who knew the story, that place was not a grave, it was a symbol of courage, of mercy, and of a choice that changed the course of a life, a people, and perhaps even a galaxy. Vrillanak returned to that battlefield once, years after his rescue. His body was stronger now, the mechanical limbs integrated seamlessly into his form. He could walk and move with purpose, though the memory of pain never fully left him. As he stood in the quiet field, the wind brushing against his scales, he thought of that day, the smoke, the fire, the cries of the wounded, and the human who had refused to leave him behind. Evan Carter. The name came easily to him, even after all the years. Vrillanak had never been one to forget. He had tried, in the beginning, to focus only on duty and survival. But some debts, some acts of bravery, could not be erased from memory. Evan had risked everything to save him. Not for honor, not for recognition, not for glory. Just because he chose to do the right thing. The Karthak had long valued strength in battle, in conquest, in survival. But Vrilanak had learned a different kind of strength, the strength to act when it would be easier to walk away, the courage to choose mercy over hatred, compassion over revenge. That strength had carried him from the edge of death back into life. That strength had changed him